Good morning, good evening, hello. God, my hair's all over the place. Oh well. Happy coffee day. Hope everybody's doing well. Picking up where we left off. This time, really looking into Jesus' genealogy. We're still talking about impure. Still talking about, just as a reminder where it came from. Impure, Peter speaking. He said to them, this is in Acts chapter 10, verse 28, but God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean. Boy, that speaks volumes to us today. And quite frankly, so I'm about to look at Jesus' genealogy and the absolute craziness that is captured in the lives of these people, as displayed, and really it's a very legitimate question. Anyone, I mean, impure, unclean, and you see what these people did, and they're not only listed in Scripture but listed in Jesus's genealogy. It's pretty crazy. So it's going back as far as Noah. Noah had three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Genesis chapter 9, verse 18. Shem had a son named Arphaxad, and 7 generations later we have 3 brothers, Abram, who later becomes Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. It's Genesis 11:10 through 26. To tell you what, I'm not going to read the scripture references. I'll put it in the notes if you want to go dig them out. Haran had a son named Lot. You remember Lot, Sodom and Gomorrah, who had 2 daughters. After Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, Lot's 2 daughters got Lot drunk and had sex with him. The older daughter had a son named Moab that became the father of the Moabites. We'll hear more from them later. The younger daughter had a son named Ben-Ami that became the father of the Ammonites. I have a quote, just actually it's a thought of mine. Scripture is amazingly simple, while at the same time it's amazingly complex. And at the same time, it's timeless. It speaks just as clearly today as it did 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, which is astounding. But it doesn't just list the pretty stuff. You know, it doesn't just list the good stuff. And let's face it, if you were writing the Bible, were you in a history like this, Chronicles, would you put in it the same things that God had written down? I mean, this is, so Lot's daughters got him drunk, had sex with him, and so they could carry on his name. Would you put that in? If you were writing the Bible, would you really put that in there? And frankly, Haran, Abram's brother, is not listed in Jesus' genealogy, but continuing with the craziness, let's go on from there. Abram, 2 brothers, Nahor and Haran. Haran had a son of Lot. So God gave Abram, at the time was his name, a prophecy of Christ. It's in Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, and all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So remember, this is a prophecy of Christ, right? Now watch what Abram does. So God has a promise, given him a promise that he will have a family as numerous as the stars in the skies, or the sand on the seashore. And just, you know, as he got to be about 86 years old, he says, hey, maybe God needs a little bit of help in that. Trying to help God with the promise, Abram had sex with his wife's servant, and she had a son named Ishmael. And Abram, like I said, was 86 years old when that happened. Abram turned in Genesis chapter 17, Abram became Abraham. Sarai became Sarah. They had a son named Isaac. Isaac is the child of the promise. to carry on the promise. Isaac is mentioned in Jesus's genealogy, as is Abraham. Isaac, Abraham and Sarah have Isaac. Isaac marries Rebekah, and he and Rebekah had twins named Esau and Jacob. Jacob is mentioned in Jesus' genealogy. Jacob married Leah, who had a servant named Zilpah. Jacob and Leah had 6 sons. It gets kind of bumpy here. Jacob and Leah had 6 sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, as well as at least one daughter named Dinah. In Genesis chapter 34, Dinah was raped, and her brothers Simeon and Levi killed every male in the town to avenge their sister. Jacob and Zilpah's Leah had a servant named Zilpah. Jacob and Zilpah had 2 sons, Gad and Asher. Let's see, where's the easiest way to go? Let's go this way. Jacob and Leah's son Judah, right? So Judah, who is mentioned in Jesus' genealogy, check this one out. Judah married Shua. She was a Canaanite. And they had 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. Married Tamar, but before they could have children, he died. After quite some time, Jacob, again in Jesus' genealogy, thinking that Tamar, his former daughter-in-law, was a prostitute, had sex with her, and she became pregnant with twins. The twins were named Perez and Zerah. Again, there's scripture references in all this. I'll post it. Perez is in Jesus' genealogy. In order to further confuse things, Jacob also married Rachel, who had a servant named Bilhah. Jacob and Rachel had Joseph, whose brothers sold him into slavery, and later saved his family from starvation, and Benjamin. Jacob and Bilhah, Rachel's servant, had Dan and Naphtali, and that's the 12 patriarchs. That's the 12 sons that later became Israel, the country. Perez, one of the twins from Judah and Tamar, was the father of Hebron, and 4 generations later had Salmon, Salmon. Salmon and his wife had a son named Boaz. Interestingly enough, Salmon's wife was Rahab, the prostitute mentioned in Joshua chapter 2. And matter of fact, it's pretty interesting when you think about it. Rahab's story was told in Joshua chapter 2, verses 1 through 24. And then later on, she's mentioned in chapter 6, verse 17. But she's also mentioned in the genealogy by name. She's also mentioned in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews chapter 11 and in James chapter 2. So Ruth will carry on. Now we're into the book of Ruth. Ruth was a Moabite and was married to one of Naomi's sons while they lived in Moab because of a famine in Bethlehem. After Naomi's husband and sons died and the famine subsided, she and Ruth moved to Bethlehem. Naomi and Ruth moved to Bethlehem, where Naomi was from originally. Boaz, who already lived in Bethlehem, was a kinsman redeemer for the family of Naomi's family, actually Naomi's husband's family. And he, you can find the story in Ruth, it's only 4 chapters. He married Ruth the Moabite. Moabites are not Jewish. Amazingly interesting when you really look into all this. So Ruth and Boaz had a son named Obed. Obed had a son named Jesse. Jesse had a son named David, King David. Prophecies of Christ being on David's throne in Psalms and Isaiah and Jeremiah, like I said. But all of this, everything I just went through, is recorded in the book of Ruth. So David, the king of Israel and a man after God's own heart, as mentioned in 1 Samuel and Acts, had an affair with a woman named Bathsheba. who was married to Uriah. David, all these people, David and Uriah, were mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus. David has an affair with Bathsheba, who is married to Uriah. When David found out Bathsheba was pregnant, he arranged to have Uriah killed. And these are people in Jesus' genealogy. Matthew chapter 1 verse 6 says David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Bathsheba was not named specifically, but her former husband was named. The story was named. I mean, you get it. 27 generations later, we have Jesus. And of course, Jesus was born to Mary and Joseph, which, kind of staying with the theme, Mary was pregnant before she and Joseph were married. And Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 20 and 21 says that if a woman could not prove her virginity when she got married, which of course Mary could not do that because she had already had a child when they got married, but she was, by Jewish law, she was required to be stoned to death in front of her father's house, and her father was to participate in her stoning. This is insane stuff, and it spoke volumes to the Jewish people that were Matthew's primary audience. So, here comes the son. Hello, son. So, impure? Really? You think you're impure and can't be part of God's family? Again, Acts chapter 10, verse 28. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean. Peter speaking. So question 1. With some of the lives presented in Jesus' genealogy, how would you or anyone you know not be accepted in God's family? Everyone is included. Question number 2. What are you going to do about it? The bottom line is, and I love this verse from Peter, which of course also spoke the words in Acts chapter 10, verse 28. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, and I'll wrap up there. But in your hearts, reserve Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. Peace out. Live kind, y'all. Be blessed. See you next time.